Welcome to our Innovation X Roundtable today. This roundtable is on 5G, edge, and AI powering smart cities of the future. And so as part of the introduction, let me introduce myself also. I'm Ikhlaq Sidhu. I'm the Chief Scientist and Faculty Director for the Sitarja Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology here at Berkeley. Our mission at the Sitarja Center is to empower innovators to positively change the world. We do this by educating students. We have a teaching method called the Berkeley Method of Entrepreneurship, and that is all about developing professional skills as well as entrepreneurial mindset and behavior, putting those two together. And in fact, those professional skills are quite often deep, technically deep professional skills. We are also offering, or we do also offer programs with certification for professionals that develop both leadership, innovation, technology skills. One example, one that we've been running for quite some time, 10 years in fact, is the Engineering Leadership Professional Program. This does lead to also a certificate in engineering leadership from UC Berkeley College of Engineering. At the campus level, we have student programs and certificates that are parallel with that. We engage students in labs and courses, and a lot of these are basically at the very edge of industry and academic boundaries. And these are things, for example, in data, in blockchain, deplastify the planet, a lot of the emerging areas, the places where I like to say often no book is written and the industry is just emerging there. That definitely includes alternative meat or alt meat. And finally, we engage with stakeholders all over the world in companies and universities. So kind of rounding out the introduction for all those that don't know us, this is just important background information. And the roundtables are really all about change. We've seen a lot of change recently. Now, the economic situation, the health situation is still fluid and adjusting, and we're continuing to see all kinds of new change. I think if anything, change is the constant. We've always kind of known that, but now it's like constantly accelerating, if that makes any sense. So with the changes that are going on, we like to invite all the various stakeholders in these roundtables to better understand. And what we're going to do is I'm going to pass it over to Lakshmi in 1 minute to basically kick off the roundtable. And as we go through it, we will look to the panelists not only for your insight into what is happening in terms of the change in all these areas, but we'll also look to your guidance for how should Berkeley students, our research projects, how should all these things align to really capitalize or properly engage with all of that change that's going on. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Lakshmi, and we're going to really start this discussion. Welcome to everyone.
Thanks so much, Ikhlaq. It's really great to be here back at Berkeley again. So I know all of our panelists are also really excited to be here. So today's topic is really about 5G, AI, edge, and IoT, and how together these things are really going to enable real fast processing and AI workloads that will really unlock new applications within smart cities. So I'm really excited to get this panel started. We've got a great panel today. I think I'll start by asking each of our panelists to just introduce themselves for just 2 minutes. Maybe Soma, I could start with you, General Manager for AI and 5G at NVIDIA.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Yeah, my name is Soma Velayudham. I'm the Industry General Manager for AI and 5G at NVIDIA, a long history with telecoms and now with AI with NVIDIA. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Ikhlaq. Then I will move over to Andrew. Would you like to please introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, thank you. This is Andrew Herson. Thank you so much for having me. I have a deep background in computer vision and AI and have deployed smart cameras in cities for parking safety and traffic applications. Looking forward to shifting some of those workloads from the far edge to the near edge in the MEC and possibly expanding use cases beyond smart cities into manufacturing. So thanks again for having me.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. It's great to have you here. Then if I could ask Hazem from PricewaterhouseCoopers, a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, to introduce himself.
Thanks, Lakshmi. I'm Hazem Galal. I lead PwC's work with cities and local government, including cities globally. I'm also a member of the World Economic Forum's Future Council on the Cities of Tomorrow. Computer engineer, started my life working in telecommunications, and glad to be back, at least virtually, with Berkeley. I'm Haas 95 graduate, so it's always a pleasure to be back.
Super, great to have you here. Jordan, can I ask you to introduce yourself next from the city of San Jose?
Hi, my name is Jordan Sun. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for the city of San Jose, and I lead the Mayor's Office of Tech and Innovation. I came from a background before joining the city last year during the pandemic, from a background of digital health, finance, as well as the national security community, and have also spent time investing on behalf of the CIA. So really look forward to joining y'all. Thanks.
Great, Jordan. And then finally, Lyle, Director of Advanced Technologies at T-Mobile. Could you give us a brief background?
Yeah, Lyle Birds. I work in advanced emerging technologies at T-Mobile, and we are taking technology and ecosystem development and enabling new 5G use cases over our network. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lyle. So I guess I'll get this panel kicked off. What I thought about is that we could try to structure this in kind of 3 parts, where first maybe we could talk a little bit about understanding the various parts of a smart city. And then maybe we could discuss a bit about the benefits of the smart city. And then, of course, maybe we could go through what some of the challenges that we face in building out smart cities. Obviously, this is a very complex project here, right? So I think I would like to start out with one of the first parts of the smart city, which is connectivity. Andrew, could I just ask you to first start by telling us a little bit about the current status of 5G rollouts? I mean, 5G will probably be a big component of smart cities, maybe both in the US and globally.
Absolutely. So you start with the hardest question and send it to the Verizon guy. So 5G is part of an evolution. So it's the 5th generation cellular technologies. So think of it as the next step from 4G, and 4G was an evolution just like 3G before it. The status of 5G, as I think about it, is early adoption is happening primarily in Europe, and you can see that happening. You can look at the Ookla maps over there, and installations are really exceeding what we're doing here in the States. Parts of Asia also are showing real early adoption, which is fantastic. And then, here in the States, we're picking it up, both Verizon as well as T-Mobile and the other guy. Adoption techniques and strategy are a little bit different. So, Verizon entered into the ultra wideband segment. So trying to offer ultra high throughput, really low latencies. Other competitors are entering in the lower bands to try to, hit new areas of the States, maybe rural areas, but ultimately we'll all land at the same place. So you'll have the high, mid, and low band to power all these applications here. So that's how I think of it at the beginning here.
Great. If we continue on connectivity a little bit, Lyle, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about Edge and how Edge is going to be empowering real-time, low latency type connectivity and how that's important for smart cities.
Yeah, absolutely. And as the name implies, you're actually closer to where the device is and the application is. So obviously, that allows for tighter control loops and feedback loops, enabling some new things. We've seen posited throughout even the early stages of 5G planning, things like remote surgery, those sorts of things. I don't know that we're quite ready for that in 5G specifically quite yet from a production point of view, but you do see a lot more of a couple of different categories, especially involving Edge. And that is kind of the massive IoT opportunity. So lots of devices coming in. And as part of that, because we're really kind of bringing the network up into a sensing network, we're really wanting to bring a lot of applications close to that edge so we can get real-time response, real-time calculations. As we're talking about today, AI, analytics, a lot of the automation to do a lot more local activity. And then the other thing is, right, we see stuff on the entertainment side where you see people talking a lot about XR in general, and obviously with NVIDIA on today, right? You see a lot of those types of very bandwidth intense applications, as well as the fact that because we have a human in the loop, right? You're going to need that kind of tight feedback where basically some sort of gesture response is going to need to be processed, rendered, and then sent back to the home as quickly as possible. So we'll see the gamut. And then I'll just say, we also see kind of the third category, which is a lot of people who've been making some sacrifices by sending their stuff into the cloud. What I mean by that is they've had to compromise maybe the bandwidth, or maybe they've had to think about their economics in the cloud, and they want to do more at the edge in general. And that's more of kind of your general purpose enterprise compute. There's a lot of excitement there. And I'm looking forward to that, especially in verticals like healthcare. So.
Fantastic. And of course, by the way, I encourage all of our panelists to jump in whenever they have extra stuff to add to this. But what I've gotten so far, 5G is rolling out slowly but surely. It's really fast, and edge is going to bring it even closer. So going to the next component of a smart city, I would think about the sensor side of it. And Hazem, I wanted to ask you about what exactly are we talking about? Does every single thing in an entire city have to be connected? Can you help us to understand what that will look like?
Sure. So, I mean, we talk about the Internet of Things, and it's really becoming the Internet of everything. And if I wanted to start the cycle, I would really start with the sensing part of it, because before the connectivity, you would need to generate all this data and information. And depending on who you speak with, the potential of IoT and the economic opportunity and all the use cases, has been estimated that in the next 10 years, we're going to get up to 14 trillion of value added globally. Now, this is going to be a function of how quickly we're able to implement all of these IoT, sort of like, and putting in all these sensors, wearables, sensors in AR, VR, and all of this. So the whole idea is, we're starting to measure, air quality, sort of like real life data, from machines and factories and cars and all of that, and really starting to get it through, massive connectivity and process it on the other end. And it's this IoT promise that is, across all of the different sectors, and being able to sense the city almost in real life, or at least parts of it, whether it's, the leakage in a water pipe, when we're looking at utilities, whether how effective our smart grid or our smart home is, that is going to help us really generate all the data, transmit it quickly, analyze it, and be able to make better decisions on how we plan and operate our cities. Now, it's not all rosy out there, because, it's very fragmented at the time being. There are different platforms, and 400 different platforms. And one of the decisions that a lot of city sort of like CTOs would struggle with when they're designing their smart city solutions is which IoT platform they go to, and how are they going to fit that within their wider architecture and use cases, so that they're able to sense, collect images, have all these sensors, IoT, and be able to do this in a interoperable way and in a more consistent way.
Okay, yeah, so that sounds like that'll come into more of the challenges part, that there are various IoT platforms, and they're going to have to all be brought together in order to really bring all the data that's relevant to make decisions. Maybe that helps us to get, if we can maybe understand more about kind of the brain part of a smart city. Soma, NVIDIA works a lot on this stuff, cloud analytics. Can you tell us something about the key challenges to enable AI and real-time applications at the edge?
Yeah, first, let me share maybe the status of where we are right now. So as Hazem was saying, sensors and sensors are getting very intelligent and software defined. So it's not a static sensor anymore. It's a software defined and a very intelligent sensor. So video camera has become the #1 sensor now. So if you think about it, video camera, my Ring alarm, my Ring doorbell, it's become an AI gadget. A simple video camera has become a video gadget now, video endpoint, or an AI endpoint. So sensors are getting intelligent, and video cameras are becoming one of the top AI sensors. So that's feeding in. And from an analytics perspective, there are two kinds of analytics. One is you analyze and you take action on a closed loop action. The other is actually you use AI where you continuously improve, and actually software is writing software. That's what AI is automating itself, right? So we don't really have to teach the AI how to read a face or recognize a theft or do something that's safe in a city. So the AI is continuously able to optimize it. So we see this intelligence, which started from the IoT analytics world. The intelligence is going to go up exponentially as AI becomes more and more prevalent. And we are starting to see this both in terms of computer vision, which Andrew talked about, he's deployed. And then we also see this in a lot of natural language processing. As you can now see, how good your Siri iPhone or your Google is in terms of recognizing natural language processing. It's able to translate, it's able to transcribe, it's able to do a lot of things. So the combination of these sensors between voice and video, which is very prevalent user interface, and it's going to kind of increase the uptake of smart cities as we go along. So my point here is the sensors are getting intelligent. The AI capabilities are getting very sophisticated, and they can process. And we call this a conversational AI. You can just start talking into your sensor and they can see you and understand you. So this level of complexity is going to change, or sophistication is going to change the way smart cities are built and make it more secure.
Oh, amazing. That's very encouraging to hear that the systems are becoming so sophisticated that we're going to be able to handle all of this data that's moving so fast. And it sounds like sensors means everything.
Yeah.
Your wearables, your control systems, your lights, your cameras, your everything. That's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about the benefits of smart cities. So Hazem, maybe I could ask you, especially with your work on future cities with WEF, what do you see as some of the services that citizens will be able to expect with a smart city?
So a lot of these services are going to be sort of like in many verticals, and we're seeing a lot of cities already typically would start with security and mobility services, in terms of crowd management, in terms of, some of the smart mobility applications, the more basic ones like smart metering, and also with utilities, right? Now, when you start thinking about, this is sort of like the direction of travel that cities have begun even before 5G, right? 8-10 years ago. Now, what's going to happen, moving forward with 5G is that you're going to see a lot more of the new applications that are 5G enabled. They're going to start primarily in dense urban areas, and then this is going to gradually go into urban and suburban, and then selective rural areas. So it's not going to be, and sort of like an overnight deployment of all of these 5G dependent citizen services. It's going to be a gradual one following the deployment of 5G, and economics are going to play a very important role of this. Now, what we're seeing a lot also are all the sort of like digital twin related applications. The more simple ones, quote unquote, are related to, sort of like intelligent machines like cars and all of that are going to be, through edge and all of that, helping communicate with the driver, or in the future, through some more optimistic applications like truck platooning and eventually to autonomous vehicles. That's all going to come. But the idea is, we're going to start with some of the services that are in more confined locations, like hospitals, like, remote surgery and some of these things. And then eventually, as the deployment spreads, we're going to see more of the mobility applications that depend on, higher coverage of 5G. The other thing that's going to be very interesting as well is some of the decisions and the new business models that some of the cities will have to make about who actually is going to pay for some of these IoT deployments and smart poles and what have you. The enabling infrastructure that we're going to be able to piggyback on and have all of these, retail, tourism, mobility applications. Not all of them are necessarily going to be depending on 5G. A lot of them you could do with Wi-Fi or 4G, but It's that common infrastructure, including smart poles and 5G, that a lot of new business models are going to have to, emerge between the private sector and the decision makers at City Hall, so that we can make it more viable.
Exactly. And so you're seeing, basically you're describing an evolution going from some of the smaller use cases into larger ones. Jordan, I want to move to you next because you have a really ambitious project. San Jose is on its way to being a smart city. If you maybe don't already call it a smart city. Can you tell us a little bit about the Building Better Basics for Smart Cities project you have? Or program?
Yes. And so Building Better Basics is really trying to refocus ourselves away from the smart city innovation theater, a term that Professor Steve Blank at Stanford coined, especially in the government space. And really, it's just a focus on what key technology benefits do our residents actually want from a smart city. And so we decided on 3 key pillars based off of our assessments. The first is on data. We needed better data science capabilities in the city to be able to operate, hopefully one day, at the level that most corporations can. So that's including filling the talent gap, but also thinking about applications and infrastructure for our data. And then ultimately also passing a digital privacy policy that we got passed within 5 months of joining the city. The second part is on digital product experiences. And improving those experiences, because residents expect bi-directional communications and service delivery from us these days, especially through whether it's a mobile or web app. And so we needed to improve those experiences to meet hopefully enterprise grade experiences. I wouldn't dare say I would be able to achieve consumer grade experiences yet. And then the third part is on our wireless connectivity and infrastructure. And that goes both for the broadband initiatives that we have, but also thinking about IoT, especially, I've been very passionate about LoRaWAN as well. And so if you think about data being the brain of the city, digital product experiences being the eyes, ears, nose, and mouth of the city, and then ultimately the rest of that wireless network being sort of the rest of that nervous system that feels what's going on in the city. That's kind of what we think about when it comes to building better basics that we've been focused on for more or less the last 8 months.
Are there any, could you share with us if there are any specific, so I understand you're building the building blocks of the basics, but are there any citizen services that are already launched that people are already kind of starting to enjoy built on these basics?
Yeah, so, my team went from 4 to 40. We raised about close to $4 million for a variety of initiatives. The predominant part was focused on pandemic response. That's purely focused on bridging the digital divide. And so during the pandemic, we were able to launch our San Jose Digital Inclusion Fund, which not only accelerates the deployment of 5G small cell networks, but that acceleration by bringing the telcos to the table creates shared economic gains that we then put a portion of that back into the community so that we can help educate folks on the importance of low-cost internet plans, provide digital literacy training so that there's sustainability in terms of the households when it comes to the internet, and then ultimately provide access to a device. The second part is, we were able to very quickly spin up after doing a lengthy discussion and user research in the community, spin up basically a Zillified version of mental health resources for youth and young adults. And so that bypassed completely our procurement laws and processes by engaging with community technologists to build something that is for us, by us, in the spirit of FUBU, if you will. And we thought that was quite powerful to show City Hall that we can very quickly build applications and be able to solve pain points in the community that often are caught in the middle between city and county responsibilities. And then the third is, we just stood up a tech support hotline as well to help bridge specifically device side issues that resulted in the community receiving devices and falling back into the digital divide because of device problems. And so we stood up a hotline where we not only provide through IEEE mentors training to our youth that then man the hotlines, but then also ensure that our residents continue to remain on the right side of the digital divide.
Very exciting. We have a couple of questions that have come in. There's one from one of the participants that is asking that they would love to reference the digital privacy document that you referred to, and asking if that's publicly available to reference that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, all the council notes are publicly available. I'm happy to, if you find me on LinkedIn or whatever, I'm happy to post it. I can't pull it up right now, or else I'm, not being distracted from the panel. So.
Thanks, Jordan. And we also had a question about listing the 3 categories of building better basics again, if you could repeat that.
Yeah, the first pillar is data. The second pillar is digital services and experiences. And then the third is our wireless infrastructure.
Super. Thank you for that, Jordan. I also wanted to, I know that a lot of the other panelists work in organizations that are also launching some pretty exciting services. So I'd like to ask if any of the others could also let us know what they're doing in their organizations. Andrew, perhaps from Verizon?
Yeah, sure, I can start. We have a couple interesting sensor-based products that we have launched and installed in cities. The first one is intelligent parking. So the idea is that you launch a GPU-enabled camera. You install it at the vantage point of a light fixture and look down at the city to see what the availability of parking is. This is great for citizens, but it's also great for management because they can make data-driven decisions about, how much to charge for a parking spot. If there's too much demand, raise the price, too little demand, lower the price, that kind of thing. We also have a product called Intersection Safety Analytics, which is a traffic safety product where we install cameras at the middle of intersections and look at the relationship between cars, pedestrians, and bicyclists to ensure safety of those citizens. Again, here we can make data-driven decisions when changing infrastructure at intersections instead of sort of randomly guessing. I think after working in this field for really practically 10 years now, I think about those two things together, because when many cars are parked, not that many are driving. And when many cars are driving, not many are parked. And so it's impossible to think about parking and traffic separately. It's really a mobility problem. And as we move into autonomous vehicles, this problem will also change. I'd also like to reference what one of the other panelists said earlier, which is that each one of these cities is different. And so, it's impossible to think about creating an AI model that can service the world in a blanket way. For instance, here in California, I can drive 80 miles per hour on the highway. It's perfectly safe. Everybody else drives that way. When I lived in Washington, D.C., I would say 65 miles per hour would be the safe number. And so, there's a difference between enforcement and safety. And that's why I think someone said something about AI driving AI. I mean, that's totally relevant here because each city has different characteristics. The definition of safety is defined by the citizens. And so therefore the needs are defined by the citizens. So it's a really interesting space to be in. And, it starts with the sensors and I think simplifying the sensor technology. So in terms of challenges, installing those products on poles isn't easy. You need to get permission to do that. Managing them for the long run is hard because they're complicated devices. So bringing that compute from the far edge to the near edge in some sort of mech infrastructure or some sort of a server type design, I think is probably a good way for the future.
Soma, I was wondering if I could ask you to comment a little bit on that. That was really interesting how, as Andrew said, you need different AIs in different cities, and you guys are the AI machine over there. Tell us what your reflections are on that.
Yeah, as I said, AI is really maturing very fast. And part of the reason is availability of digital data, availability of very good computing. And I want to kind of pick on this point that Andrew made regarding edge computing. The thing is, if you think about it, if you put sensors around the city, as Jordan was also mentioning, if you have a lot of sensors, one thing is to put the sensors up. The other thing is actually maintain, right? And to actually keep it smart all the time. And that's why the software defined makes a lot of sense. You want to make a sensor that's very software defined, and you want to have the brain working on the cloud. So you can update the software, you can do all kinds of things. And the sensor is just out there as a physical device, as an input-output device. The flip side of that is when you put everything to the cloud, then you incur latency because you're going too far out. So the art is, you want to centralize as much as possible, but then you want to decentralize as much as required. And then you need to find this middle point or edge the right sweet spot for every city, and every city is different. So you have the sensors on one end, and then you have an edge cloud, which is emerging as the dominant key point here to succeed in smart cities is the edge cloud, and then the software defined. And this edge cloud in combination of sensors is making a huge difference, because you're able to actually achieve the benefits of software defined and smart sensors, yet you're also also able to achieve the latency sensitive and privacy and data federation and so on. So in my opinion, this combination of edge cloud, smart sensors, and 5G, which is the connective nerve, actually is bringing us to the next wave of innovation.
Thank you, Soma. Oh, I'm about to go in the dark here. I have to wave around my hands in this room. Okay, I'll see if I get the lights on while I ask the next
You need
question.
an AI. You need an AI to say, don't switch the light off.
I don't have a good enough AI here. Okay, I'll dance around before I ask this. Before we go on to some of the complexities, also tying into what you just talked about, Soma, I wanted to ask Lyle one more question, because I know that T-Mobile has some pretty exciting use cases around sustainability. Lyle, could I ask you to give us a few comments on those use cases?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got, I always kind of say it's the run of the mill in terms of, I work with sensors a lot. So, but we do have essentially environmental sensing, both the indoor use cases, which are expected, air health, those sort of things. Although a lot of people don't think about air health within their own home, right? Outside of something like carbon monoxide or your usual fire alarms. We're doing that both within, industrial buildings as well as the home. And then we've got some other use cases that I like with a lot of our existing products and partners. Probably the most interesting one is really a fusion of really something that's very simple, which is taking weather information real time, as well as the sensor information in terms of lawns, and whether that's the city itself or it's for enterprises or even lawn management systems, bringing together and really just trying to make sure that we're actually conserving water in terms of just sprinklers. Seems like the simplest thing in the world. I know that I worry about at my house, I have a nice lawn and I can actually manage it and do it myself. But if we think about this happening effectively across a city in its entirety, right, it takes a lot of information to do that. And not everyone's watching every piece of green space. So it's actually kind of cool to see a lot of our partners and products kind of team together and provide kind of this end solution where basically it's a little bit worry-free in terms of you're going to get the right amount of water, but not too much, right? In terms of this for your lawn or whatever you're managing. So.
Lakshmi, do you mind if I just jump in here real quick?
Please.
And just, I think I love the application case, and Soma, to tack onto your point also on the architecture and connectivity side. I think the other part though, from a city's perspective, is the business model. Because when we talk about thousands of intersections, let's say in the transportation space to be covered, New York, for instance, has like 12,000. Right. So coming up with a business model that says at which intersections should be covered, and ultimately how can the unit economics be scaled across the number of intersections that meet the city's procurement and budget requirements and the constraints of that, I think is really important. And then coming up with pricing models, because if you're going to do an enterprise SaaS model, then how do we do it in an effective way where it's not costing us upfront an arm and a leg, or maybe there's another financing partner involved. And so I just hope that folks think through that from a project finance perspective and come up with flexible, creative business models where we can create public good, which the city cares about, that is responsible to citizens' values and needs, but at the same time, obviously help accelerate and commercialize emerging technologies, because I know GovTech is not easy. A lot of folks are pivoting now into GovTech, as I think it's the final frontier after healthcare. And I really hope that folks are coming up with creative financing and business models to approach us.
I think the simplest thing that we can do is forget about the idea of blanket coverage. Transportation is completely related. So, you don't necessarily have to cover every intersection to make a prediction about what traffic patterns might be. Similarly, in parking lots, I mean, I've stared at so many parking lots in my career that I can tell you that the first row looks like the second row, and based on the density of the first row, you can really predict and create a model for the rest of the parking lot. So this is methodology for sure we have to adopt.
I would say, Andrew, what's interesting is there's the flip side of that, which is that for the basic use cases, I would agree. But there's still a lot of regulations now that as we look toward bigger use cases like autonomous driving and especially drones, where right now the government regulations expect that those remotely operated or remotely piloted or even AI are constantly connected to the network and they don't lose coverage. So we've got to figure out how we're going to balance this, right, as we go forward. So especially, I think for the use cases that I hope we see more often in 5G and don't punt the 6G.
Yeah, sensor coverage versus connectivity coverage are two different things.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
for sure, a flying drone needs to remain connected to the network, but I don't think we need a video camera on every square foot of our cities.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's something to consider.
This is great, you guys. We've segued right into the third part of our conversation, which is the challenges with smart cities, and some of these complexities that you're talking about are very important. Jordan, you mentioned something about business models and public-private cooperations. I guess I'd like to ask any of the panelists, Hazem, maybe you have a view on this. What is the best way to get stakeholders together to work on this?
It's starting to happen. That's the good news. I mean, whereas traditionally there was sort of like an upfront investment that typically the mobile operators would have to incur, be it 3G, 4G, and to some extent 5G. Now there's a shift in thinking in terms of, okay, what are the potential benefits from a 5G deployment, and how can I start getting, sort of like in these conversations with a city or even at the national level, in terms of, how do we partner in a way so that there's some sort of like creative business model and financing. And I mean, one of the things that are starting to happen as well is also on the procurement side. So a lot of cities and government entities are allowing, more innovative procurement so that I'm involving the potential partners from the private sector during the planning stage. I always say PPPs should stand for properly planned projects, where I've brought in the private sector early on. When we look at all the different assets of infrastructure, technology seems to be the one that is driving in that way, in a most innovative manner, to bring in the private sector with creative procurement manners, so that I'm actually involving the potential operators of the infrastructure early on during the planning, and I'm not just waiting till I've designed what my project looks like, after planning it, and then expecting an operator, or a tech company to come in and be my partner in operating this IoT platform or smart poles or what have you in a city. So it is definitely a multi-stakeholder approach with the private sector, with academia. We're getting a lot of innovations as well from academia and in urban labs and so forth. And of course, we always forget the citizens, right? The people who are actually going to use the services. And how can I sort of like deal with NGOs or, influential citizen groups to really make sure that I'm designing a smart city and the services, and at the heart of this design are the people who are actually going to use it, regardless of their amount or level of digital literacy and so forth.
Thanks, Hazem. Any of the other panelists about the challenges, whether stakeholder or technology? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to just add, the smart city actually has a lot of similarity with the public transport, because if you think about it, it's an infrastructure that you're building for citizens, and I know we need to look at financial break even and so on, but at the end of the day, an infrastructure that you build, like a public transportation, for example, does not have direct returns, right? It's a productivity gains of the citizens that then comes back as a gain for the city and the country. So there are some cities that has very successfully been deploying public networks, right? Like New York has very good connected, DC has good transportation. And so that thing is, how do you find the balance between, productivity, the citizen productivity, the gains from the citizen, which is an indirect return to the investment that you make, And how do you then fund it? And I'm sure Jordan and other cities are wondering, how do you fund that infrastructure from the city? Then you get the return in an indirect investment, indirectly. So it's I would say the best is to look at the past and look at other references like infrastructure investment, because the way smart cities should be treated is exactly how other infrastructure investments for cities are.
I'd like to, oh, go ahead, Jordan.
Sorry, so much just to really tag on to that, I just came from a Nurse and Young conference on P3, where I sat next to the global head from Fitch Ratings. And, I challenge all of y'all, even from industry, that we should probably engage with folks who drive investor sentiment, especially when it comes to the grading of these bonds, and how public financing and infrastructure financing is put together, to better educate them on digital infrastructure. To your point, that we can reduce the risks in their mindset of digital infrastructure as being very similar actually to the other infrastructure that we've put forth in the past.
I just wanted to add to the digital infrastructure about citizen choice. So, we talked about these are our cities, we create data, we should make the data work for us. That's a really technical thing. I think also for citizen choice, you can choose where your compute resides. So it's our city, we need a computer. That computer should be within our environment. It doesn't have to be a laptop or a desktop anymore. It's a cloud computer, but it's close to us. And what that means is that can be a clean energy driven computer. And so you can make decisions about what powers that computer and take responsibility for how you contribute to your society and your local environment. This is different than cloud computing, where you really have just a few choices. They're in discrete locations. They're very much driven at the state level. I think it can be driven at the city level. And then, this kind of steers the discussion back towards edge compute and the value of edge compute, and why cities would really want to invest in that and make that compute work for them.
Thanks, Andrew. Hazem, did you have a comment as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow on the point that Suma mentioned about, measuring total impact of some of these investments. Because if we look at it in terms of pure financial return, the numbers wouldn't necessarily always tally up. But if we're, for some sort of like use cases like smart parking, smart lighting, all of these, the business case is there, and we could do it 2-3 years break even and all of that. But when you start to look at some of the other mobility solutions and to think about what is the total impact of my investment in terms of reducing pollution or, reducing commute time, enhancing people's productivity, all of these things all of a sudden have a different way of being looked at in terms of even how some of the private equity, because private equity, multilateral development banks, and other sources of possible financing, so that the city doesn't essentially have to pay for all of these investments itself.
It's going to be data driven, right? So the ability for a city to gather that data and then broker that data, or at least be the intermediary of that data with industry, that's going to be the key driver here.
Well, we also need the talent, to be honest. And so before we start talking about this, I think the key issue and why that first pillar on data is so important when we came to the city was realizing the talent gap and trying to fill that in a sustainable fashion beyond just one person being able to do the work.
Let's not underestimate the power of one person. There was a story of a frustrated bicyclist in New York City who complained about a delivery truck, blocking his lane. And so he hung a Raspberry Pi out his window and started collecting data and, brought that report to the Department of Transportation. So again, just one citizen can make a powerful impact here.
Really great conversation, you guys. I am looking at ICLOC and thinking that maybe we are starting to run out of time, because I know we wanted to reserve some time for Berkeley to ask some questions as well. ICLOC, should I hand it over to you?
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks. First of all, I just want to say the whole conversation has been fantastic, particularly from the point of view that I'd say in 1 hour, you kind of like, for people who are outside this topic and you're thinking about this, regularly, and a lot of people are not. And in this 1 hour, I'd say we've kind of like traded off all of these major issues, kind of got to the center. This is my interpretation of kind of what we talked about. You can definitely tell me where I might have missed some of the thread of it. But first, I'll start with the summary, and then I'll ask you, after this little bit of summary, I'll ask you, what should Berkeley be doing? And that's really this is your role as panelists, and at least for 1 hour, kind of like our advisory board. Just think about how our students can help, what we should do otherwise as Berkeley. Should they be starting little startup companies in this smart city space, or is that really not what's needed? Think about the way that the university should engage. So my quick summary was, first of all, I thought you guys start off with a great story about how it really comes down to these sensors and the software designed nature of sensors today. I think that's a big topic. I don't think I've ever heard the term software defined sensor before today. So I'm gonna, I think that goes to you, Hazem. But it's perfectly right. We've heard software defined everything else. I think it's finally time to start calling video cameras what they are. And then, we kind of moved into the trends, and you talked about how it starts with the core and the economics and moving out, and maybe hospitals, for example, being one of the first adoption spots. I think that was great. I was going to make a comment, maybe some of this edge has been actually happening a lot longer than we're claiming in this conversation. If you look at where Netflix movies are really stored, and how much of that is like closer to the user, and where caches and so forth are really located. I think a good assessment of how far along the edge really is might be worthwhile. Don't have that conversation right now. I just want to put it in play. I think how cities think about it in terms of data, experiences, infrastructure, business model, all of that, had a really good discussion on examples of applications, everything from the air health, the traffic patterns, the weather and your lawn, the driving, the drones, the parking, so that's giving some context. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I am wondering how any of these decisions actually get made. How does the city decide this thing over that thing? But there's obviously a lot of complexity to it. And I thought you had a great roundout in terms of these challenges. So, that's partly the business model. I think it really is partly procurement. My guess is, when things are new and you're only allowed, and anyway, the procurement challenges, measuring impact, the whole idea of policy in this stuff. So, influencing investors, the bonds. I thought that was really good broadening of the conversation from just you can do it to how does it really happen. So, really in 1 hour, and this is my 3-minute summary of that 1 hour, but, 1 hour, I think really educational, and enabling for those of us that would like to help. And now it turns into how can we actually help? Think about the things that we have at the university. We have talented students in all kinds of areas. We're teaching things. We're definitely doing a lot in data, AI, blockchain, all these topics, that no doubt about that. We're doing a lot in business models and venture creation. So there's all of that. There's the research that you would know about. I think if I can take the 6 minutes that we have left, give me your ideas on what you think we should be doing, or how you might want to engage with us even.
It's 6 minutes. I can talk this for 60 minutes, 60 days. But I'll give you my, one of the biggest problem with entrepreneurship and business world today is this whole thing concept of business case. We want to be very accurate in forecasting and being able to predict where the business goes. The reality of entrepreneurship is you overestimate the near term, you underestimate the long term. I've been in business so long, there's never one business case that's been accurate. Either it's overdone or underdone. The business case is never true, right? It's just a baseline. What I'm trying to say here is entrepreneurship is very intuitional, and it's basically driven on first principle. Do I have to build an infrastructure? Jordan, he has to build one. Is he going to help the citizen? Is he going to? So it's very built on first principles. But the problem is finance forces us to kind of come to this logic of how everything is going to happen week over week, month over month. So one ask for me is if Berkeley can try to bridge the gap between this intuitive driven first principles versus this financial need to have such logic and structure, which will never be true. So I don't know. I don't have an answer. You asked me for the problem and I'm just giving you the problem.
Okay, no, but I got it. You like, if Berkeley as an independent kind of entity was analyzing just how feasible any of these business models were, then that, whether they are the ones that get used or not, it would still be helpful. Maybe I misread what you're saying, but that's kind of how I heard it.
Yeah, I was saying basically, the need for business cases, which is so structured and financially viable, that's actually is not true when you implement. Reality is not true, right? The reality is different. So if Berkeley can help come up with business cases and financial policies to invest by knowing the ambiguity, taking considerations of the ambiguities involved and still be able to get there. Right.
Okay, got it. And I'll open it up for others.
I would say, I guess my question back to or for folks at Berkeley would be, other than probably swooping down and helping Jordan with his problems in his area. We talked about a lot of things. We talked about sensors out in the community. We talked about digital twins, those sort of things. I'm a firm believer in providing problems or creating problems. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but basically I've got a question of context, and that is, if you want to find the best way and what the opportunities are, then turn Berkeley into that smart space, that smart city, right? You've got a large community, a large space. Do you have digital twins? Are you doing that up? What if you try to share data amongst groups that wanted to take advantage of it? How would that work? All of these things, and you'll obviously compress for time. You'll probably get an inkling of a lot of what Jordan and others are experiencing, in their daily, sort of activities. But it may go in terms of a long way of giving you a little inkling of where the opportunities are and where, there might be, some innovation.
Okay, good. It's like make a smart campus or a smart community or a smart
I'm gonna work on the assumption that's already happened, but if it hasn't, then I'd be curious to see what the barriers were as to why it hasn't happened yet.
There's definitely things in that category. They may not all be connected with each other, but
yeah.
Everything from smart buildings and the ecological and
but that would be my point, right?
Yeah.
So that's the challenge of a city as well, where a lot of these things happen organically, individual initiatives, right? Getting that coordination, getting it together, and then moving it forward in a meaningful way.
Okay, it's a brilliant suggestion. I know that we got a couple more comments.
Yeah.
Jordan, you want to? You got your hand up anyway.
Let's do Hazem first.
Okay, Hazem, go.
Thanks. I just want to build up on turning Berkeley into a smart campus, because I really think what you excel at, and I was part of this once upon a time, is in multidisciplinary work. And I think there is a very important point right now where a lot of cities have gone beyond the curiosity stage to actually starting to build proofs of concept, to actually start to roll out some of these use cases, albeit on a limited scale. So I really think there's an opportunity for you there to be helping some of these cities, with the setup of these urban labs, and taking it all the way from sort of like the pre-feasibility study, the business model, through the actual sort of like bringing in as a convener different private sector companies together with your own expertise that you have on campus and mobility and other areas, and really help cities with these living labs, and POCs before they are ready to scale up.
Thanks. You're adding a lot more dimension to it, because it's not just the idea or whatever we come up with, but really building an ecosystem with the other people that have different parts of it, and giving a place for all those people to come together, right? We are very much interested in the collisions, the innovation that happens from the collisions of all these people. So, and that's part of what you're talking about. All right, thank you. Let's see. Jordan, are you still trying to go last, or?
No, I'll go next, just real quick. Yeah, I've had the fortune of getting to know Berkeley and the campus I've been helping out with SCET for the last couple of years as both an Army Tech Scout, but later as a mentor as well. And there's a tremendous amount of talent there on Berkeley as the #1 public university and one of the top universities in the country, period. And I've actually hired multiple Berkeley students under fellowships over the summer. And so my challenge to y'all is do more to support your young technologists to be a part of this civic engagement that's happening between technology and government, whether they are part of the US Digital Corps that just got stood up, to applying for more coding it forward fellowships, to even sponsoring your own fellows to join local government and solve some of the pressing problems here faced by our community. I think that's the first step to then understand who are those customers before standing up innovation labs, by having firsthand recon, if you will, of how to actually apply your best talent, your best resources into these problem sets. So that would be my challenge to y'all. And I'd love to continue those conversations. And then the last piece of this is just, please have those difficult conversations when it comes to privacy, ethics, when it comes to these different competing ideologies. It's really important to have that, to push us into being more accountable, responsible, and ultimately transparent.
Thanks for mentioning at the end that was running through my head through a lot of that discussion. So I'm glad that came through. But I got your point on the government and technology kind of interface and the policy side. And you might be just like the best first stop for us, because you're right there and probably know more about it than just about anyone. So thank you. All right. Was there one more? I thought there was.
Yeah, I had one final comment.
Yours will be the last, because so we started at 12:05. If we go with that, the hour is another 3 minutes. I'll just bend it that way, and then we'll end it.
Fair enough. So final comment that I think that you are changing the way that people learn in your institute. I think you're doing that. I think there's also an opportunity to change how we work. So when we go out into society, we can still be makers. We can still manage the block that's out in front of our house. We can use the data and manage the sensors around us. So not only are we users of the infrastructure, but we're providers of information back. So it's not really a question of privacy or a question of like big business coming in. I think that there's an opportunity here to do a bottoms up exchange between us and the communities that we live in.
It's kind of a shared economy version of a smart city in a way, like or community. The community where everyone somehow is sharing. I don't know what that platform is, but maybe that's the government's role, or maybe it's not. I don't know. But in the same way that I guess Uber takes different things from different people and combines them together for a purpose. You're saying that's possible in the community more broadly.
Yeah, and then in terms of the finances, I think blockchain plays a really big role in this. So the ability to incentivize people on new platforms with new data, new solutions. So it starts small and then it grows in order to get people to participate in their cities in new ways.
I've definitely heard we need to take the internet down and start over.
Let's not go there, gentlemen. Nicola, can I take the last 20 seconds to thank our panelists? I thought this was a great session.
All right.
We appreciate you guys coming out, taking time and doing this with us. I thought it was a great conversation.
Fantastic. Okay. All right. I think then you guys have the last word. yeah, okay, fine, I'll take it. Thank you. I'll say it. Thank you also. So I got the last word. All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.